So welcome everyone to the second part of this webinar, and we had to re-record this, unfortunately, because of some technical issues after pausing the recording last time. So Jon and Fredrik very kindly agreed to present again for the sake of this recording. So I will give the floor to Jon now, who will talk about the Norwegian hepatic mats.
Thank you. My name is John Bjorne Jordal. I'm working in a small company called Miljøfaglig Utredning with biologists. We are doing habitat surveys. We are studying species and giving advice for management of nature. And I will talk about boreal and oceanic liverwort heaths in Norway. First, we have two types of oceanity. Thermic oceanity, which has to do with mild winters, and hygric oceanity, which has to do with high and stable humidity. We know many plants along the western coast of Norway which respond to winter temperatures. They are thermic oceanic. This is described for many places, for instance, in this book, Vegetation from Norway, which is also available in English. Ericacenaria is a typical one with its distribution along the outer western coast, where January mean temperature is above 0. And Primula vulgaris is another one, occurring in areas where January mean temperature is above -2 degrees. In mosses and other organisms, there are also some with hygric oceanic distribution. That means that they respond to high and stable humidity. And one example is this Scapania ornithopodioides, which seems to occur mostly in coastal mountains with a precipitation above 2,000 millimeters per year. And that means that perhaps this species responds mostly to humidity. Another example is this small fern, Hymenophyllum peltatum, which also occurs in the same areas. But additionally, this species also seems to be frost sensitive. So Hymenophyllum is both thermic oceanic and hygric oceanic. Now the habitat in Norway. We are talking about heaths. That means an open landscape with few trees or no trees. It can be below forest limit or above forest limit, but normally around the forest limit. At the coast between 200 and 600 meters above sea level. It's the aspect, it's more or less against the northwest to northeast, and sometimes east faced. The yearly precipitation is normally about 2,000 millimeters, but can be lower, especially towards the north, because there the evaporation is lower. And there are normally about 200 days with precipitation in the year. And that means altogether a high and stable humidity. In addition, we see normally that the soil is shallow. It's a thin soil cover on the rocks. That means little competition from tall herbs and bushes. To the left is my colleague Kristin Wangen, which has studied these mosses in her master. She is here pointing at the site of Anastrophyllum jorgenseni. And to the right, we have another site of Anastrophyllum jorgenseni where we made vegetation surveys. In the winter, it is normally snow cover. The left photo shows Scapania ornithopodoides with ice, frozen in ice. We don't know if this does damage to the species or not. But the photo to the right shows a typical situation in the winter with in these north-faced slopes. There are stable snow cover, more stable than in the other parts of the landscape. So it can be that the snow cover is important to protect against winter frost. We cannot exclude the possibility that these species are also thermic oceanic. Something about the typical species. The most widely distributed one is Scapania ornithopodoides, which is distributed along the whole western coast until Trøndelag, nearby Trondheim. As you can see, it doesn't occur at the outer coast, but a little just somewhat away from the coast on the coastal mountains, and typically 300-400 meters above sea level, north faced. This is a rare one, Scapania nimbosa, which has teeth on the leaves, as you see. This one has a very limited area in the northwest. It was discovered more than 100 years ago by an Englishman. And 25 years ago, we thought it was extinct because of mining activity in the known area. But 20 years ago, we found new sites, and we made efforts to map it and to search for it, and we now know about 30 localities in a very limited area of 12 by 20 kilometers in northwest Norway, the municipality of Hustadvika. And we wrote about it in Lindbergia in 2010. The second most widely distributed of the diagnostic species of this oceanic heaths is Anastrophyllum donianum, which is also distributed along most of the western coast. This species is also on the coastal mountains, somewhat away from the coast. And this one is a very rare one, Anastrophyllum jorgenseni, which occurs in two areas which are very humid in the northwest, in Bremanger and Kinn municipalities. And we have written about this in 2018 in Norwegian, in a Norwegian paper called Blytia. There are rather small population of this one, and similar to Scapania nimbosa, it seems to have a very poor ability of spreading. So it hasn't reached its potential habitats. We can add this one, Pleurosia purpurea, but often this one grows in open pine forests and not so often in boreal oceanic heath. And it has also mainly a southwestern distribution and seems to be hemi-boreal. That means that it's demanding more higher temperature in the summer. The Herbatus species, there we have three species in Norway. Herbatus hutchinsia, known from the southwest. Herbatus nurenus, which is rather rare in the southwest, and Herbatus straminus. And these species are mostly in other habitats and not so much in boreal heaths in Norway. Herbatus straminus is occurring mostly or especially near waterfalls and has its main distribution now in the northwest in Bremanger. And many other sites have disappeared because of hydroelectric power development. There are many species in the British Isles which we haven't found in Norway, and we have searched for them, but we haven't found them. So we think they might not occur in Norway. My colleague Kristin Wangen made her master and also an article about modeling of potential distribution of these species, which I have mentioned. To the left is Anastrophyllum donianum with the yellow dots showing the known sites. And to the right is Scapania ornithopodioides, also with yellow showing the sites. And the colors on the map show the probability to find suitable habitats of these species. So a reddish color means that there should be a potential to find this species. And to the left, we can see that Anastrophyllum donianum also possibly could occur in Nordland, further north than we know this species. And we haven't searched much there, so we don't know if it really is possible to find it there. And with the Scapania ornithopodioides, we can see that there is a larger distribution area possible if this model is good. Important variables in this model is summer rain, mean summer temperature, rain frequency, slope, and aspect. And this article can be studied more detailed, of course. We also have the synhedral square analysis in 4 mountains on known sites of 3 of these species. 12 squares on Scapania nimbosa sites, 9 squares on Anastrophyllum donianum sites, and 6 squares on Anastrophyllum jorgenseni sites. And as you can see to the right, these are 0.5 meter, but divided in 16 small squares, or 12.5 centimeter. this can be used to see which species are occurring together. We have done this analysis in 2010, 2014, and 2019. And here is the frequency of some species, just a small selection of all of them. Altogether, we have 27 half-a-meter squares containing 432 small squares of 12.5 centimeter. And as we can see, Scapania ornithopodioides is very common together with these other species. On 55 of the small squares, that means very high co-occurring of these species. Then we have some more sub-oceanic species, Milia taylori occurring in 30% of the squares, Lipidosia personi on 24% of the small squares, Anastrepta orcadensis 21%, Basania tricrenata 20%, Dicranodontium denudatum 15%, and Cursia, mainly Cursia tricocladus in 10%. And these are examples of species occurring commonly together with the most diagnostic species as mentioned. Now about nature management. About 20 years ago, this boreal oceanic heath was described as a type. And it has been included in Norwegian nature type mapping up to about 2015. Then we got a new mapping system and the type disappeared. In 2017, it occurred again and then it disappeared. And now we are curious about what will happen. We hope, of course, that this type will be included again. It's a pity that it has disappeared. The threats against this habitat is climate change, which means a higher forest limit, more bushes, taller vegetation of grasses and herbs. And that means more shadow. The same is grazing of domestic animals, which is not a problem in Norway. There are very few areas with overgrazing. The problem is that the grazing stops and the animals disappear. And that means also less grazing, taller vegetation, and more bushes. Both these processes lead to withdrawing and too much shadow, and they will then possibly disappear. And further, we have also energy exploitation, which means, for instance, wind parks and roads in these areas. On the coastal mountains, there is much wind. They're very suitable for wind parks. In Sweden, you're very clever in preparing possible value pyramids of fungi and other organisms. Here's a proposal from Norway to evaluate these oceanic heaths. At the top, the most exclusive and diagnostic ones are Scapania nibosa, Anastrophyllum jorgenseni, Anastrophyllum donianum, Pleurosia purpurea, and Scapania ornithopodioides. And then we have the more sub-oceanic ones, which are more widely distributed, as Milia taylori, Basania tricrenata, Lipidosia personi, Anastrepta orcadensis, and Cursia tricocladus. But if we find some of those in the top, we we can conclude that this is oceanic heath. As conclusion, we can state that there is needed a better knowledge of the habitats and of climate impact. We need better knowledge of the species. We would be very happy if the habitats were included again in the habitat surveys in Norway. And we need better red list evaluation and protection of habitats and species. And I wish to thank Kristin Vangen and Kristin Hassel for information and photos.
Thank you very much. And there was a question from the public, there was a question from the audience. Could possible habitats from Scapania ornithopodioides be modeled for Sweden as well?
Yes, I think so. You can use the article of Kristin Vangen and others, and use the same method as in Norway. And I also think that the method can be refined by studying more closely the climate and habitat where the species occur, and if you have good climate models, it would be possible to do that in Sweden also.
Perfect. That's very exciting. And thank you very much once again. And now we will move on to Fredrik's presentation to see how the story progresses eastwards.